Welcome to What's Left, a weekly political discussion challenging the mainstream left. I'm Eduardo Barca, with co-host, teacher and socialist Andy Lipson, and community organizer and socialist Kenny Cepeda. We are online at what-s-left.webnode.com. Please subscribe, rate, review, jot down our information, and turn on your notifications and share your favorite episodes wherever you found this episode. Thank you. So today we'll be discussing Alison Collins she is the vice president of the Board of Ed, and she has made recent headlines from comments that she had made a while back in 2016. Most of the attention has been brought to light because of the recent attacks that happened in Atlanta when there was a rampage shooting of mostly Asian residents there. And we covered it as well. We covered those the anti-Asian sentiment and the news around it in a previous episode that people can check out in a link below. And so Alison Collins, is an educator. She's a mother. She is a community organizer, and she's been elected as a new member of the Board of Ed. She has been an advocate for public schools for a very long time. And some of the comments that she made in tweets in 2016 have caused a lot of controversy, especially around anti-Asian sentiment and racism. So I expect that we'll have a lively discussion around it. Maybe I can fill in how it all started.
Yeah. Yes, and I would say that it's not that we're discussing Alison Collins, in my mind, but discussing the furor around these tweets around the Board of Education, what's happening here in San Francisco. All of this stuff is connected to what's happening with the closing of schools and the failure or the pressure to reopen schools that we've been talking about. So all of these figure into this, as well as so just to try to make sense of what's happening politically, because I also believe we'll be talking today about identity politics and cancel culture at some level even. And also, I also think it's the bankruptcy of local politics as well as national politics. So I think there's a lot of things to discuss in this, because it's a very it's complicated in that there's so many different ways this is messed up, in my opinion.
So there has been a calling for the resignation of Alison Collins because of some December 2016 tweets that she had made that were specifically calling out the Asian American community, the Chinese community. And some of those tweets, I hope that we will have a shot in the screen for people to see. She had said, "My best friend from school says she feels alone in the Chinese community. She feels ostracized when she speaks up against anti-Black hate. Where are the vocal Asians speaking up against Trump? Don't Asian Americans know that they are on his list as well? Do they think that they won't be deported, profiled, beaten, being used, being a house N-I-G-G-E-R, I think it's spelled R, and it's still being a N-I-G-G-E-R, you're still considered the help." These were some of the most offensive to many Asian Americans, according to the media. And she also talked about how Asian Americans have used the white supremacist way of thinking in order to advance. This is what she said. "I'm looking to combat anti-Black racism in Asian community at my daughter's mostly Asian American school. Many Asian American students and teachers I know won't engage in critical race convos unless they see how they are impacted by white supremacy. I grew up in mostly Asian American schools and know this experience all too well. Many Asian Americans believe they benefit from the model minority, BS. In fact, many Asian American teachers, students, and parents actively promote these myths. They use white supremacist thinking to assimilate and get ahead." So these are what she had released on December 4th, 2016. And so Collins, being the only Black woman on the school board, has been called out for these tweets. And they're calling for resignation. There are 7 Board of Ed members, and out of those 7 board, 2 only oppose the resignation. And it's brought up a lot about who can say what. Many groups, whether it be online or offline, have said that maybe the way that she said it could have been different. Some people do call for restorative justice's sort of ways of speaking about this. Others say she is completely wrong, in the wrong. She should just be removed. This is unacceptable. So that is what Alison Collins had said, as well as I'll stop there.
So let's just add some more meat on the bones of the context of this. First off, the initiative to ask her to step down was taken forward by 2 other Board of Ed people, Jenny Lam and Fauga Maliga. And Jenny Lam, I believe, identifies as Asian or Asian American. And I don't know about the Fauga Maliga. The interesting thing about Fauga Maliga is the political context to this is that these tweets were found by the group that were unearthed by this group that was trying to recall the people on the Board of Ed, and they're recalling them. They try to give 30 reasons for why they're recalling, and the people they call for recalling are Gabrielle Lopez, Allison Collins. Those are the 2 people who voted no, to basically say, no, this person should not be removed from vice president. This person should not be not allowed to be on any committee. The idea of after this vote took place, Allison is being taken down as vice president of the Board of Ed, and also she's not going to be allowed to be on any committees. So it was Gabrielle Lopez, who's the president, and Allison Collins herself who voted no, don't do that. But the other 5 voted yes. Now Fauga Maliga and Gabrielle Lopez and Allison Collins are the 3 Board of Ed members mentioned in the recall initiative, right? So when they say they want to take down this group that exposed these tweets, are actually looking for the heads of Gabrielle Lopez, Allison Collins, and Fauga Maliga. So it's interesting to me that Fauga Maliga now wants to come back and say, oh yeah, take her down. All right. The other thing I just see in a lot of the language that you hear from the people who are doing this is an attempt to kind of save themselves from the Board of Ed, which is under attack right now. And why is it under attack? The major reason, and if you look at the 30 reasons, 14 of them are about the not reopening schools. So the Board of Ed is under a lot of pressure because they haven't been reopening the schools. And then the parent groups are going after them. And London Breed was a major person in saying that she denounces these attacks. Allison Collins has to step down, and London Breed is part of the group calling for or supporting the lawsuit to get schools to reopen. In addition to the reopen thing, there are also there are 2 other issues that I think are causing this political pressure that's coming. Number one was this ridiculous attempt by the Board of Ed to, in the context of all these schools that are closed, to rename 44 schools around the district. That has been very unpopular. I never liked it. Many teachers don't like it. Parents don't like it. And the fact that we're separated from our school and they're trying to rename the schools, I thought was crazy. That thing was set in motion a while ago, but it was still crazy. And last, there has been an effort to get Lowell High School to not have a kind of a policy to basically go to an all lottery way of getting students into Lowell High School. And Lowell High School is a West Side school, predominantly, and you have to test to get into it. It's a public school. It's part of our public school district. And you had more white students there, more Asian students there, lower percentage of African-American, Latino students, a lower percentage of special ed students there. It doesn't mean they don't have any, it's just a lower percentage. And so there's been talk of ending the merit-based selection process, or partially merit-based. So this is all the context for that. And then, in fact, I think there was a hot mic situation with Allison Collins where she was very critical of some of the parents trying to defend Lowell's old way or Lowell's thing, and I believe was accused those parents of sounding like racist. The Board of Ed is under a lot of political pressure, and what you see now are all these essentially progressives, many of them, all of these Democratic Party members at a local level. Like, people often say, "Oh, the political fight is local." Well, here you get to see the kind of circus that happens when these people are under political pressure, as they all try to collect each other's scalps so they can defend themselves. I think Jenny Lamb was one who said, the board, described the comments that Alison Collins made as, "This continues to harm and divide our communities. We need to move forward to govern the district." So basically, they're saying we got to jettison Allison to protect our skins. And Maliga, the other person who was part of the thing, said, "After Commissioner Collins' graceful resignation, we would be left with the task of repairing and restoring the dignity and respect that we all deserve." Essentially, these are people basically trying to cast around for who do they have to pitch overboard to get the Board of Ed to feel like it's a body that can move forward after all the mistakes they've made and after all the traps they've fallen into. Because again, the recall people, they don't just want to remove the Gabrielle Lopez and Fauga Maliga and Alison Collins. They ultimately, some of them, or I think many of them, are actually talking about removing all of them and having a board appointed by London Breed. So this to me is a mess, because I don't agree with Alison Collins' comments in those tweets. I think they very much align with the politics of the day of identity politics. So in that regard, she wasn't called out for it back in 2016, because these are the kinds of things that identity politics will produce. But it rightfully, in the context of all the stuff that's happening now, and in the new lens, like Kenny referred to, he was saying, like, wait, why suddenly this lens around, anti-Asian racism? With the new lens, it was a perfect target for a takedown, and it's very much in the spirit of cancel culture that we see it with tweets and stuff like that. But it's a political expression of cancel culture here, finding its way.
I know someone in the board slightly, like through friends, and I know how they got to be on the board. And so I got to learn how the school board functions and what, so basically to be on the school board, you don't get money. You get like $500 a month. So you have to have another job. I know that one of the members on the board had to resign as a teacher and will work at a different district because of conflict of interest rules, and to be able to be on the board. And so the school board is often used as a launching pad for a political career in San Francisco. Most of the people that are members of the school board are wealthy people, or like people that are decently off. They're not your average working class person. This school board is not made up by at least my understanding, by basically families, or these are elected people that were able to garner some political support money for running a campaign and being able to be elected in order to start their political career. So you become a supervisor and eventually a mayor, or even the president of the board is very young, and has had a lot of national attention. The New York Times has written multiple articles regarding Gabriela Lopez. For example, there was the whole issue of the Washington mural that was, controversial, and they wanted to remove it. And again, at least from what I remember at that time, also was kind of a top-down approach. People weren't necessarily asking for it, but it is a career-making move, in my view. And so, again, to me, it's interesting that the school board was being pushed as this progressive, bastion of ideas and ideals, and then now it's under attack. And so, just wanted to give some context that the school board is the political launching pad for people, and so therefore there is an incentive to save your ass, to you're not embattled in what's happening. And even though now, again, they're being attacked from multiple fronts, because they were sued, right, by the city of San Francisco, and so that is in progress, even though it's not moving. But
And that suit was about the reopening of schools.
Yeah.
If we're talking about the same group of people that are organizing their efforts to be able to recall the board members, I have an issue with some of the people who want to recall the board members and want the city, as like the mayor, to appoint Board of Ed members, because I don't think it's democratic for anybody to be appointing anything. I think we need to be invested in the politics of any system that we're in, and we need to vote democratically who we want to represent us in an institution. Now, is this the sort of institution that we live currently under that I am pleased with or satisfied? No, I just think that that any position that is going to represent groups of people, they should be voted in, and that's why I think I have differences with this. Certain groups of people, certain groups of organizations that want to recall the Board of Ed. So I'll start there. I find we didn't even say, by the way, that today Alison Collins threw in the mix a lawsuit. Collins' suit seeks $12 million in general damages from each defendant, the school district, plus 5 board colleagues, plus $3 million in punitive damages from each of her 5 board member colleagues. That tally comes to $87 million, plus fees and other monies. But even representative of this, so I'll leave it there. And Gabriela Lopez is not being sued because I imagine that because she didn't vote against Alison Collins. And the issue that she is she's through in this lawsuit is because as the only Black woman on the board, she was removed of her duties as vice president, and she says that it violates her freedom of speech and her due process rights, and that there are laws mandating that employees refrain from retaliating against employees who participate in protected activity. So it does interest me. The issue around this, and for me, is what then if your identity cards don't protect you? As you know, identity politics makes it seem that you are supposed to speak up because you are Latino, because you're Black, or because, and you can't because you're white or because you're privileged, etc. Even with the identity cards that one has, you could be further ostracized in the way that this is being played out. Watching a Black woman being pushed to the side, I don't know, it does something about it. It just makes me feel identity politics is eating itself up from the inside. It just feels as if there is this ongoing division that happens where one group of people and another group of people are being pit against each other. And this is actually causing further divisions and not actually unifying us as a working class. And I'm not necessarily coming to Alison Collins' defense because I'm not very, I don't know if our politics aligned, but what I do feel I must say around this is, where do we draw the lines for our movement? How do we then come together and not use these racial divisions to further divide us? I'm still grappling with this because, of course, as I said in the previous video, I personally will always denounce any sort of racism, any anti-Asian, any anti-Black, any anti-immigrant sentiment out there that is prevalent. And of course, I I'm upset by a lot of the things that have come up, and from history, not just recently, as we discussed in the last video. Anti-Asian racism has existed previous to this year and previous to Trump, and that is something that I will always fight against. I just don't know if this is the path for us as a movement. I don't think that this is going to take us on the path that we would like to see for our movement to really dismantle a racist capitalist system that is the real boogeyman out to destroy us as a society, as workers. So I'm just grappling with it.
So for me, one of the fundamental issues of identity politics, even as well-meaning as it may be for most people, is that it assumes that it actually is kind of racist itself, because it assumes that we're all the same. It assumes that, someone from Sunnydale or from 3rd Street has something in common with Alison Collins. It assumes, because this is the same shit that people were talking about in Florida, when Latinos voted for Trump, and they were like, what's wrong with them? As if the Democratic Party owns all Latinos, as if Latinos are not supposed to think differently, as if Latinos are a monolith, as if Asian Americans are a monolith, as if Black people are a monolith. That is an inherent lie that is perpetuated, is a gross stereotype. It completely excludes class from the equation in the interest. And so, for me, the school board actually doesn't represent the working class. It actually represents this capitalist system that we want to destroy. To be part of the board, even though Gabriela Lopez actually was a teacher and didn't have the money, she was able to make it in there. The reality is that most people that make it to the school board are not your average working class people. So it's fundamentally undemocratic. So pretending that facade of democracy is democracy is counterproductive. So I agree. I am in organizing circles in San Francisco. I've been in the crosshairs of attacks, weaponizing the victim, narrative, and also it assumes that we're all the same. We start diving into notions of privilege and this and that, and this is why I hate identity politics. I despise it. I think it's so corrosive, counterproductive. It's anti-revolutionary. Is the fact that we play oppression politics. Who suffers more? And guess who decides who suffers more? And then a lot of nonprofits, let's throw them in there. A lot of people in the community want to decide who suffers more, who rank people, and then pat ourselves on the back for splitting the crumbs. Because that's what we're doing. We're fighting for crumbs over here. And so these people are not the people that are going to lead us to changing that fact that we're fighting for crumbs. None of these people in this system, because they're playing into that system and they're hurting us into that system, to believe that we live in a democracy, to believe that we're part of a process that actually money determines all the time. And this is at a micro level. So for me, that's where we had to start, getting rid of this illusion or delusion that we live in a democracy, even locally, that we don't have a say. And so actually, to me, to a big degree, the school board is the enemy. They have been the enemies. They've abandoned families. They've abandoned working class families. And so, yes, so when people are angry trying to remove them, I don't know who's behind that. It could be other group of, elite people there's a lot of people that are angry about this whole school name changing in the midst of a pandemic when working class families are going through hell because they have to, do remote learning, remote teaching. And so I don't trust any of those members, even though they may be well-meaning. The fact is that they're in it for themselves. and it's showing right now.
This is a complete political clown show. That really what it exposes is when Trump is removed by a fraudulent process, and we get Biden, and suddenly that is like somehow maybe better, like because the election was real this time, and the votes were counted. Like that process was a sham of democracy, and we go from Trump to Biden. You're right. And now is that better? No, it's not better. In fact, we're going to see that the attack of the capitalists is going to continue apace. So if you have an all-elected school board and it produces this kind of clownish behavior and inability to actually work for regular people, which it should. I mean when I say it should not work for regular people, because it's part of a capitalist apparatus. It's doing exactly what it's telling. Whether those people are appointed or elected, it's coming after us. And so this is what's going to happen. So that's the first thing I would say is like now, and Alison Collins is not like, I don't support her being taken down on this basis, because I think it lets off it. We don't learn any lessons out of it, because I do think for the left, if the left think there's something here, this is just left cancel culture crap, basically, to the extent that it's the left. To the extent that there are right-wing and powerful forces coming to take them out, well, they left themselves open to it because they are on the wrong side of this question as it relates to reopen schools. I don't think we're going to defend the working class cannot defend itself by putting Alison Collins or Gabrielle Lopez. The working class can only defend itself by basically taking all these clowns out and building our own institutions. Like, we have to have an insurrection. That is the only way that we're safe. All right, is a revolution that removes all these people, well-meaning or not, from positions where they're not going to be able to help, because their jobs are run by people up at the top, and that's the true whether you're elected or whether you're appointed. So I don't really care who's driving the recall initiative. I don't support the recall because I believe the recall deflects from the real criminals. The real criminals are Biden and Newsom. So the Democratic Party is fully responsible, particularly in California, for the lockdown that smashed our schools and kept them in a closed place. London Breed is responsible for that. Now she's trying to take out another Democrat in order to deflect that. It's no different than what this guy Malika is doing. Like there is no principle here. So since there's no political principle animating anybody's actions here. And Alison Collins, when she went against this thing, and even her lawsuit's going to say it, is going to say like, wait, hey, they don't have the right to do this to me, and it's going to say there's some procedural problems with how they did this. What do I care about that? That's how she's going to go after it. The lesson to be learned is partly the lesson of none of these politicians can be trusted at a national level, at an intermediate level, and at a local level. It's all a game of it's various levels of Game of Thrones that has nothing to offer working people. The lesson, the political lesson in it, because I do believe Allison and Gabriella and other people, I believe they're relatively sincere progressives, is the bankruptcy of identity politics. Is that identity politics makes you a racist. Identity politics are racist politics, even as they say they're there to fight racism. Because look what she's talking about. She's talking about Asians that we just talked about last week, about experiencing slavery and internment in this country as having white supremacist thinking. Like, first of all, that eliminates the actual experience of Asians in this country that's been racist. Number two, it lets off the whole institute. It lets off the capitalist class for racism and says racism is about white people. And if you behave like a white person, then maybe you are racist, which is the model minority bullshit, which itself is a fraudulent notion. I get what people are saying, but it's fraudulent as a way of trying to change society and challenge racism, because it blames people who are trying, like, is an immigrant who comes to this country and doesn't want other immigrants coming in, are they white supremacists? Like if they're a Latino immigrant, really? Is that what we're going to call them? Like it's totally broken. It puts everyone into their identity pot, and like Kenny was saying, and puts them on a spectrum of most oppressed versus least oppressed, and then tries to figure out through privilege which side you should or should be on. It's completely bankrupt as a way of dealing, and that's the trap that she fell into. But by and large, the reason that tweet went out in 2016 and no one said anything is that wasn't a problem back in 2016. It's not even a problem today. Calling people a minority or even the white supremacist thinking, it's still the common currency of these politics. They're completely bankrupt. And that, if there was a lesson to be learned, it's not resigning getting Alison Collins to step down. It would be getting identity politics to step down. Like that would be something that would be a gesture to the left to figure out how do we push this aside as a way of fighting racism, because we now see that it's completely incapable of dealing with racism because it itself is divisive and it itself is racist. And in this case, it's going to be used as a takedown on a person who essentially came to her awareness. Well, I don't know, but is using identity politics as a framework for talking about race in this country. And it will put you in this situation. So for me, I don't care. Like the thing I have a problem with this is because of the cancel culture nature of this whole thing, which is why I agree with Gabrielle Lopez defending, but she talks about it as a right-wing attack, and that's a bunch of bullshit. The left is coming after her too. And she's trying to it's like everyone is lying. Everyone's trying to make stuff up and no one's being truthful. All right. And it's partial truths. So all of them to me are like not helping in this regard. So I would just say that if I had to vote, I would vote no. I would vote no, don't take this person down. But I would say the left needs to have a come to Jesus conversation about its politics and about how it understands racism and how it fights racism, because the identity politics are completely incapable of fighting it, and in fact will only promote those divisions more. That's what I would like to see come out of this. I know for a fact that is not what's going to come out of it, but it's partly why I wanted to talk about it, because this stuff is a object lesson in how local politics are no less a cesspool of unprincipled opportunism than national politics. And secondly, that identity politics are just bankrupt, and in fact they're harmful to our cause the longer we stay with them.
For me, identity politics lacks a grounded analysis of race and what role it functions in capitalism, and so that's why it gets so messy and so subjective, among our circles. Again, I wish this was just playing out in the school board and in the national politics, but this is in our communities, and by and large is the quote unquote educated class bringing these corrosive things that and you can even challenge those things because it's like a fundamentalist mindset. I think we talked about this in the past. It's like if you challenge this, there's mechanisms within this framework to cancel you, to exclude you. And you mentioned, Eduardo, like the Jehovah's Witness mindset, or other very strong like religious institutions. You can't challenge it. You're thrown out, and so then you get a situation when everyone speaks the same, does the same, says the same stuff, without real independent thought on these issues. It's very detrimental. It's counterproductive again. And I really see, I get the intention. I'm not saying don't challenge racism, don't challenge, sexism, don't challenge ableism, all these isms. But unless we go for the throat of the capitalist system, you will never address them. We're going to be bickering for crumbs and fighting each other and destroying each other, while the truly privileged of this world, not just this nation, get away with murder. They're stoking the fires of racism and sexism, and we keep settling for the crumbs.
I wanted to say to your comment, Kenny, about my background as having grown up as a Jehovah's Witness. I think we have talked about this in the past, and maybe I'll bring it up again because of the issue. Is we are going to get some things wrong in the way that we evolve, as we evolve politically. And I think people are going to make mistakes, and they are going to really have missed the mark or say things that after further thinking, maybe you might decide that that's not how you wish for it to come out, or you might just have a change of heart, or however, or even if we are to invite some extreme racism into our cause, into a movement, we're going to have to. I mean, a lot of people voted for Trump, right? And Republicans and conservatives and even conspiracists. I think the way to sort of unify is to be able to understand that there are going to be a lot of healing to do, and there's going to be a lot of mistakes, and we're going to have to work through it together. And this cancel culture, now some people want to call it consequence future, change it up. It's detrimental to our cause. It's going to push people to the margins. It's going to push people out, and it's not going to allow them to feel comfortable enough to say what they really want to say. And maybe they really are going to say something that's really racist, and they need to have those difficult conversations. But to push people to the side, it's not. I don't think that that's the way for us.
And we're talking about the left now, or what says it's the left. And we started this channel on the idea that there's problems in the left, and this is a major one, because while identity politics is going to be the basis for an Alison Collins takedown, identity politics has been the entire basis for the Biden's administration's lifting it up and talking about how wonderful it is. So we have a lot of identity politics ahead of us, because identity politics has gotten us to the left, to this moment, but the idea that so much of us on the left would think that the way to deal with this kind of stuff is to just remove people from things and take people out, like there's absolutely there's no justice in it. I mean, who would want who would want to be in such a world where that's the kind of approach we take to this sort of thing? Now, that is the kind of approach we're taking, and it's very connected to capitalism. I'm just saying that, man, I would not want the left to be forging a new society with this kind of crap, because it's very toxic and very, I think it's anti-human, anti-social, anti the idea that people can make mistakes. I certainly, in my time, I said racist stuff, said sexist stuff, thought sexist stuff. I mean, we talked about it in a previous episode, and I will make that mistake again. And it might be a different mistake, but should I be removed because of it? I would want somebody to point it out. It could be embarrassing. It could be like, oh shit, I didn't want to say that. I'm sorry. Whatever. I hope I would apologize. But the idea that I'm not fit to have a job, or I'm not fit to hold a place by virtue of something I said, it's just nuts to me.
Yeah. And I especially have an issue with people who abide by the privilege rules. But when I point it out, when I use the very same rules of this of privilege, the rules of privilege, suddenly it doesn't apply sometimes. Such as the reopening of schools, when I talk about teachers and their privilege, and working class families that make up the majority of families that attend public education here in San Francisco, suddenly privilege goes out the door. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't matter. It doesn't, all the privileges that teachers carry, speaking English, being documented, making more money than the average working class family that attends public school, as well as being able to work remotely, having health insurance. All of these things don't matter. And that's the framework that they operate under, though. That's why I bring it up. I know that that's not the framework that you would frame things as, Kenny and Andy, but I choose to frame it that way for people because I want them to see how it just doesn't Do you see how it doesn't work? You see how you yourself, you don't even follow your own politics. You're not even fitting into the framework that you think in, the way that you imagine the world. And so I think that that's the reason why sometimes it gets frustrating for me when I think, I'll use the word, when I think it's convenient for some.
Yeah. And I think maybe the other point I was thinking about is, so I want to go back to those people who are pushing the recall of the Board of Ed. And so many of those reasons were about the schools not being open. And if you looked at the reasons, what did they talk about? The damage to our students, the racism of these shutdown schools and online learning, the loss of the students' futures and things like that. This is real. Like if you go to that recall and you look at some of those reasons, I agree with all those things they said. But let's even do this here. Who's responsible? If we were going to try to get to the top of, let's get to the top of who's responsible for these schools being shut down. Is Alison Collins' name going to come up? Is Gabrielle Lopez's name going to come up? Is London Breed's name even right? I don't think so. I think actually, if you really want to deal with this, here's some names we need to talk about. Gavin Newsom, sure. Cuomo, fine. Trump, Biden, Pelosi, Schumer, top of Republican Party, top of Democratic Party, for sure. Eric Schmidt, Google, Amazon, Gates, World Economic Forum. That's what we're talking about. Like, those are the characters we should be talking about. And the fact that we're down here dealing with like London Breed, Alison Collins, Gabrielle Lopez, recall, shows we have no idea about the forces that are in operation. Silicon Valley has something to do with our schools being shut down. So it shows me that, like, I even get distracted by it. I'm sitting here talking about London Breed and Gavin Newsom. And frankly, we're not getting even close at that point. I'm kind of myself falling for it by having to play this little game here in this hamster wheel, which doesn't even let you really see. Like, this is a little hamster wheel connected to a giant clock set of wheels. There are much bigger gears out there that we need to be dealing with. And that, to me, is something that is actually, like, I feel like I fall for it myself in saying it here. So if you can come up with other people, those are the names I feel like we have to do that every once in a while, because this weird shit that's going on has such an effect of closing your field of vision down to no longer deal with the institutions that are making this shit happen.
So for me, the world I'm fighting for is a world full of empowered individuals. I think a lot of times socialism gets painted, socialism, communism gets painted as, everyone's the same, no one thinks different. And for me, it's the contrary. Empower individuals that are willing to be wrong. That have conviction to make an argument because they process it and stand corrected if they have to, and so for that world to take shape, we are gonna make mistakes, like you said, Eduardo. We are gonna be wrong, and especially when we're dealing with things that are so far beyond us, almost, like this massive structure. And I'm talking about really like conspirational theories, how it gets dismissed. You're in the dark. We're trying to figure stuff out. And so in order for us to act in common association, we're going to have to be able to disagree. And actually, I will encourage disagreement. This whole like same mentality, this is what this is producing really to me. Like, this is what I see around me. Some of my colleagues in the community organizing, just this same product, the same mindset, the same mentality, the same wording, the same attacks, the same corrosive shit, and if you dare to challenge that again, you're an enemy. You're out of touch. You're in that whole thing is weaponized. And so I think that in order to begin to challenge this, it's gonna have to come from our communities, because this thing is corrosive and it excludes people that, you know, that challenge it. And so we're gonna have to spend some of our currency, you know, in the bank in there to challenge this and stand up and say this is wrong and be loud about it. You know, because it's not helping us at all. It's not, you know, and then like, you know, like again, I don't know, you know, I you know, as of now, like I see the school board as obviously they because they're part of that system, they're not my allies. But maybe I will have comrades, you know, if we debate, if we actually talk openly about the disagreements, and maybe there will be comrades there. But not if we talk, not if we accept the professional class telling us what to do, managing us, you know, telling us that we can have convictions and that we can be wrong because we'll be canceled and we'll be governed by fear, because that's what it produces. It produces a community governed by the fear of being wrong.
I do think, of course, it would require a community response, but it will require a community of workers. And for me, as us as teachers, for us as community of workers to have an impact at this moment, which really would require, like, if we were going to really clean this thing up, we have to remove the Board of Ed and replace it with our own leadership and structures. The mayors have to go, the governors have to go, obviously the corporate heads have to go, Wells Fargo and all those institutions have to go, and we have to run these things ourselves, and we have to move them all out. But to do that, we first have to come together and go back to our workplaces and figure out what the hell, how did we get to this place, you know? But if anything shows the nature, the inept nature of our current union response to this, it was how our UESF president responded to this moment. And I'm not just calling her out, I'm really calling out if you as a worker right now think your union, and I mean us, we are the union, is doing anything about this time and moment, I'm going to say you're deluded. We are sitting behind our laptops doing nothing. And I think the response Susan Solomon gave is a perfect example to this stuff, is a perfect example of how meaningless we are in this right now by virtue of us stepping out of this. Because Susan Solomon on a Saturday, I believe that's reported, she signed the petition to say Alison Collins should be removed. And then on Sunday, the very next day, removed her name from that petition pending discussions with other labor leaders. If anything could indicate how bankrupt our working class movement is, it is that act. Because there's no principle in any of it. Did she mean it when she signed it? Did she mean it when she took her name off? Is she going to mean it after she consults the labor leaders and figures out what to do? That is the situation is. And that is not Susan Solomon's position. That is the working class position we have right now. Because as long as we stay away from each other, then we will have no say, or rather, our say will be irrelevant to what happens, what the world that's happening around us. And I think that's the situation our unions are in right now. They are irrelevant right now to the way the world is being shaped, and actually leading the charge in many cases for the dismantling of in-person education and ultimately the dismantling of unions, and even the loss of mental and manual labor jobs for all of us, and by and large. But that, to me, I wanted to share because I felt like it was a symbol, like the idea of a union president putting their name on something and then removing their name and then saying, I got to talk to my other labor leaders and figure out what the right thing to do is. That, to me, is endemic of exactly the situation we as the working class find ourselves in at this moment.
Yeah, I saw that.
And people are going to think I'm doing a takedown on Susan Solomon, and I'm not. I'm talking about. I'm not just talking about unions. I'm talking about us as workers. We have chosen this path by staying behind our laptops, by not going back to school, and not going back to school with the intent on fighting what's taking place right now. Because if we go back to school just to start it up again, just like the recall people want us to do, we're getting nowhere. We have to go back to school with the intent on challenging the forces that are really in play here. World Economic Forum, Silicon Valley, Wall Street, Democratic Party, Republican Party. Those are the people we have to be fighting inside of our schools.
Yeah, I'm in agreement about fighting Silicon Valley. For sure. I hope that my friends can really see that the threat here really is Silicon Valley and the takeover of our schools. And I hope that unions could come in support of that cause to reject any sort of no-touch future. All right. Anything else? Right.
So I will say that we talked a lot about a person named Allison today, but next week we'll have a different person named Allison coming to our What's Left, because we're going to be talking about a very interesting thing that Allison McDowell let me know about that's related to testing around dyslexia and gamification that's going on. I don't actually understand it all. So we're inviting her to come and visit and talk with us to explain the implications of this stuff. I want to do a little reading about it, but I think every time Allison comes on our show, my mind gets twisted into a pretzel, and my mind gets blown. So I want to see what we learn next week.
Yeah, usually take me a week to go back to normal after talking to Allison.
Yeah.
Andy, I imagine you'll be sharing this on SFUSD Educators Connect.
Yes, sir.
When are you suing them?
Exactly. I want to get a lawsuit too, man. Everyone's suing everyone. I feel like I'm being left out of the lawsuit, Olympics.
All right. Let's see. Let's conclude. What's Left is a weekly political podcast / channel challenging the mainstream left. We post information about our topics and our guests on the episode notes wherever you found this episode, or on our blog at what-s-left.webnode.com. You can find past episodes to this podcast / channel there and connect with us. I remind folks, if you like anything you have heard here, please share your favorite episode, rate, review, and subscribe to any of our 8 platforms on podcast, Spider-Man, Spotify, iTunes Podcast, Stitcher, Google Play, and on channels Bitchute, LBRY, LBRY, or LBRY, LBRY, Odysee, ODYSEE, or YouTube for now. Let's see how long we last on YouTube. If you would like to give us feedback about something you've heard or suggest something for us to cover, contact us through our blog. I'm Eduardo Barca with co-host Kenny Cepeda and Andy Lipson. See you next time.